All right. Good morning, everybody. Let's get transition over. There we go. Um, that tab off there. Making sure everything looks good across everything. Hey, TBD Gamer, welcome to the stream. Good to have you here. You guys can see before I got started, there's a lot of migrations going on. It looks like our linting stuff is working. Um, so this is one case where um, I'll often be like, yeah, we're just gonna do it to try and fix it. I didn't want to get into a tooling stream today, so if it broke, um, we were just gonna revert the changes. But um, ESLint Angular to version 20, so that should be good. Um, I added something this morning. I can turn it on and off if you guys want, but um, with it on, you guys can see where my mouse clicks are. So like that green is a right click, the blue is a left. Or try it the other way around. Green is a left click, blue is a right click. Um, if it gets distracting, let me know. I can turn it off. I just figured it might be interesting for people to see where my clicks are going. I was looking at the ESLint changes, looking at the breaking changes. Um, so sort keys and type decorator. This is interesting. I'm curious about this. This probably, well, we can look it up, right? Instead of just, it looks, well, I guess not. There's a linting rule that looks like it has to do with the keys and the decorators for like classes and stuff like that. They switched over to Angular 20. Prefer inject. I love this rule. This is a huge rule. Um, I think I think you should be using inject now instead of constructor injection. Um, oh, and so last week we were talking about this, right? So it looks like they just fixed the rule that says, hey, you should have a component or directive. So they're meeting up with the recommendations from the Angular team there. Um, Switch prefer standalone fix to suggestion in the reference guide, and do not suppress parse errors by default. Cool. Um, so lots of good stuff there. It looks like that's everything on that change. Just want to make sure that everything seems to be going well, and then we'll get into the code. Um, like SWC and types node, I don't really care about. We'll worry about them later. Types express, again, I don't care about this. I'm not really using express. Um, express, I think, is being set up by the SSR server for the dev server for Angular. Um, and then the ESLint plugin Playwright. We're not using Playwright right now, so um, maybe if we start writing component tests, that's one thing I want to take a look at is what is it like to write a component test with Playwright? And then Express. Um, again, I'm not really using Express, so I'm not going to mess with that stuff. So let's exec nx serve. Let's get our tour of heroes up and running. and see, you know, where we got last time, and then we can jump into Tour of Heroes and just start looking at stuff. Um, Luckily, everything is up and running and serving. Our server chunks are pretty small. Our styles are pretty huge. Like we've got 45K of styles. It's actually pretty big. A little bit curious about that, but I guess one thing we could do is we could look at our network and see. So right now, yeah, it is serving 45K of styles. So it's a lot of Tailwind stuff. And one thing that I'm curious about, and maybe we could take a look at this, right? Because I'm big into performance, and I'm curious. We look here. So let's grab a tab from Chrome real quick. And in this tab, we'll just go to localhost 4200. So I've been doing this a lot at work over the past couple of weeks. I've been working on I've been working on a performance thing at work. And so here's the interesting thing about let's dock this to the bottom. Maybe not to the bottom. Let's dock it to the side. There we go. So on the performance tab for Chrome, this isn't good. We get LCP, right? And right now our LCP is going to be pretty good because, you know, the Tour of Heroes just has that H1 is the largest contentful pane, right? We have no CLS, and right there's no interactions on the page, so INP doesn't do anything. And but these tools are pretty cool because you can see what Chrome is using to calculate INP and things like that. Like we could set up field data, but it's not really going to do anything for us. But as we refresh the page, actually stop that. I don't want. Let's clear that. Let's refresh the page this way. Right. It's going to calculate our INP, our NCP. And if we were on a live site doing this, then you could see, you know, what's the LCP, and it will give you a breakdown of like customers, right? Or not customers, but people who visit your site. So like if we go to, I don't know, GitHub, right? And we pop open the tools here, we can see that GitHub has an LCP of 0.26, which is really, really good. When you hover over it, oh, come on. It's tough to give this information, but when you hover over the numbers, it will show you, this is the wrong one. This is for my site. Why not get? There we go. So now we can compare like the origins. So for right now, my LCP is like just under a second, and GitHub's LCP is around 1.5 seconds, like 1.6, right? But you can see that 91% of the people who visit GitHub are below 91% or below 2.5 seconds. Like this is what it takes to get a green rating for LCP. Is it your largest contentful paint? So the largest thing on your screen needs to paint in less than 2.5 seconds. The CLS is a measurement of how much of the page shifts. So they're at 4%. Like I loaded and 4% of my page shifted. It's probably due to like my zoom level and stuff like that, right? In the field, 3% is a 75th percentile. So 75% of people experience less than 3% shift. And you can see here that like 7% are in the 10 to 25% shift range, and 4% of the visitors are over 25%, right? INP, I'm not interacting with anything here, so actually that's not, I don't know. But those stats are very, very useful. And I'm curious how to get CWV. Those are known as the core web vitals, or CWV. And tracking those is a way to track how user friendly your site is. So LCP is a measure of like how fast does your site appear to respond, right? CLS is a measure of, you know, how easy is your site to interact with how easy is it for users to interact with your site. Like a famous bug that was related to CLS, and I see this all over the place, but I've interacted with it many, many times, is like people will add error messages to forms, right? But as they do it, the form shifts down, right? And that form shifting down often happens in a blur event. So you go click a submit button, right? And that submit button shifts down. And for a click event in a browser, it's a mouse down and then a mouse up event, right? So you click, the button shifts outside of where the mouse up happens, so the click never happens. So the button gets the mouse down, but never the mouse up. And where this is most prominent is, say you filled out a form that has errors in it, and then you go to submit it, right? The errors go away, all those errors shrink, so the form shrinks back up and your mouse button moves back up, right? And basically you've created this game of how you can never submit the form if you've got errors or remove the errors, right? It's a it's a bad experience and not something that we typically want to give to our users. So CLS is, you know, just a measure of how friendly is your site when users are interacting with it. And then INP is a newer stat that takes a couple other stats into account. And you know, the high level explanation for INP is well, first of all, LCP is largest contentful paint, CLS is cumulative layout shift, and INP is interaction to next paint. INP is kind of like the perception of lag on your site. So if a user, you know, clicks a drop down, how much time is there before the drop down starts to show up? Or if a user starts typing, right, how much time? It doesn't take into account any background calls or anything like that. It just takes into account from when a user interacts with your site, how quickly do they get a page refresh, right? And it's a perception of lag. Because a lot of these things are measuring perception. It's not measuring the actual speed of the site. It's not measuring the, you know, the actual, you know, how fast is your site, how much lag do you actually have, things like that. It's the perception. It's how friendly is your site to your users. Hey Marcus, good morning, man. Good to see you. So Core Web Vitals are really, really helpful. And you know, I like looking into those. We got off onto this tangent because I'm just curious here. We pnpm exec nx build tour of heroes. Let's just see what our build actually looks like a prod build, because the prod build is gonna minify a whole bunch of stuff. I'm really curious if we are actually building 45K of CSS, because that's a lot of CSS. Um, so minified, we're still serving 37K of CSS, and our main bundle is 240, like 242K, we can say, right? Like 38K and 242K. Um, so we're sending almost 280K in our initial chunk to the browser, right? I mean, they get gzipped, but this is the thing about gzipping is, yeah, it gets gzipped, and then they, you know, they decompress it on their side, but the browser still has to stop and parse this chunk, right? And when it runs into your styles, it still has to stop and parse this and look at any layout changes. So the more we can minimize this, and it's crazy to me that we're using Tailwind and we're using Daisy, and that's probably what it is the Daisy stuff. So I guess I mean, it's not terrible. I've seen sites that serve like 300-400K of CSS. So I'm not too put off, but 37K is a decent size, right? And then the server has some chunks that it builds for itself, but these never get sent to the browser. These are just handled on the server side. So you know, I'm less concerned about that. And in fact, it's got a couple of lazy loaded bundles on the server, um, which is really, really cool. And then, you know, um, there's one pre-rendered static route also, so we got some SSG and stuff inside of there too. Um, so you know, if we wanted to take a look, we go ahead and pop this open, and on the server we should see. So there's our index, and that's probably the pre-rendered route. Yeah. So this is our pre-rendered route on the server side. So it's pre-rendered this to send it, and that's how we're getting such a fast response time, right? SSG is kicking in. Angular doesn't have to bootstrap, so our CL or our LCP is really, really fast. And on the browser side, you know, we got a couple of things, right, that are allowing it to be fast. And there's our bundles that we're serving, right? It's always good to be aware of this stuff, especially when you're building a new site, because you want your site to be friendly. I was working with a piece of software, and I wish I could show it to you. It was, it's a documentation piece of software, and like one of the cardinal sins that I think anybody can commit in a web application is taking away a user's ability to open new tabs. And I don't care about your justification, right? Like maybe you have sessions or whatever, right? All of these things are solved problems. But as soon as you take away a user's ability to open new tabs, you break any potential workflows that they might have, especially if you commit the second cardinal sin, which is not remembering a user's search and you know where they were in that search when they go back, right? When you hit the back button or you go back to the search, if I can't get back to where I was in the search and you've taken away my ability to open new tabs, I think you hate me, right? So those are two big cardinal sins. The third really big cardinal sin that you can do, and I don't care how cool you think your loading animation is, if you force me to watch a loading animation load and then unload every time I navigate, even if that navigation is faster than the loading and unloading of your animation, I'm gonna hate your site. Right? And it's not me being picky, it's just, maybe the first one or two times I see this, I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. Oh, yeah, whatever, right? But if I'm doing it over and over and over again, and suddenly every time I go back, I have to type in the search, and then I have to remember where I was in the list. And then I can't keep a tab open because I want that tab open. No, I have to click your stupid links to follow through your stupid animation, right? Like, I'm already salty, right? So that's my big rant, right? Make sure your sites are friendly to your users. Your customers and your users are the only ones who are going to determine the success of your software. And well, maybe your people are good at selling stuff and can get users locked into your software, or maybe it's mandated by the company that you work at, or right, there are lots of ways that bad software gets into users' hands and they suffer through it. But the thing is, as soon as anybody gets a chance to move off of that software, they're going to jump at that chance. So, for what it's worth, make sure your stuff is friendly to your users. Anyway, let's get in and write some code, right? So there's my tour of heroes. So last time, right, they wanted us to create this interface. Instead, we went, oh, you know what I haven't done? I haven't started WebStorm, and we've got an update. So I guess we'll let it update while we... so last time, they wanted us to create this interface. Instead, we created a store, right? We're going to use the store for our hero. And then they wanted our heroes class, right? Oh, so now that we've created this hero, now they want us to add a name and an ID and a name. So we'll get this into our template. And we also need, did we get this far? I think we just got here. We didn't create the inner, I'm not sure if we've got the ID. We'll need to add an ID to our store, to our hero. And then once we've got the hero, we can update our store to include, the ID 1 and Windstorm. And then we can add this stuff in. So we'll go through this piece. Let's see. Are we updated? No. So it looks like we're almost there. There might be some plugins that we need to update, but I think we can be pretty code heavy today. We'll be looking at what they're recommending, right, in Tour of Heroes. Like, there is nothing wrong with creating this hero interface. I actually think it's a good idea. Because you're abstracting the hero out from your template, right? And that's one of the big things we want to do, is make sure that when we're designing software, and this goes back to the discussion we had at the end of last stream, right? Where we want to stop optimizing for the beginning here. And what do I mean by that? This beginning is, we're optimizing for the amount of time and cost it takes to get the software into users' hands. Here, we aren't doing so much optimization, right? And this is kind of like what I call lean agile, where you're trying to cram as much into your 2-week sprint as possible. So you're always pointing low. And when you're in your pointing exercises, you're being called out for pointing a 5 versus a 3, right? And it's never the other devs that are calling you out for pointing a 5 versus a 3. It's usually somebody from product or a manager or somebody like that, right? because we're optimizing this upfront cost, right? Here, we're saying that we aren't optimizing as much the upfront cost. And in fact, because we aren't optimizing the upfront cost, it can cost us more than even, you know, this is the upfront cost. This is the initial release, right? Like anything that we have to do to fix the initial release, right? By the time we get here, you know, and this is made up, right? Um, these could be completely off base, but for the majority of the cases that I've experienced, usually you're even more expensive after the initial release, by not doing this. And that's why lean agile gets such a good name, is because hey, look, we released, we fixed all the bugs, and we're still less than it would have cost us to do it the other way, right? And this isn't waterfall. We can still do agile this way. It's just not lean agile. We aren't optimizing for developer time and cost, right? But once we come back in 6 months and try to fix things or add a new feature, well, now we're starting to be a little bit cheaper, right? And then in a year, we're a lot cheaper. And then maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, we can still add things or fix things. But by that time, everybody's forgotten it. It's such a spaghetti mess, right? We're in a rewrite. And that's what we're trying to avoid with our uh, with the way that we write code. And how do we do that? Well, instead of optimizing for time and stuff like that, we're optimizing for the cost of our code, right? What does it cost what does it cost us to own our code? How quickly can we fix our code? How much does it cost us to make a change to our code, right? Things like that become very, very important. Um, anyway, oh, hey, look, NX console's caught up. It now wants to try and install the MCP server. I want to install the MCP server, but I think I want to do it during like a middle of the week stream. I am so I've started a new job. I'm trying to figure out how like middle of the week streams work with my new job. Um, this week I will be going into the office. Um, he likes the drawings. I actually like the drawings too. I'm trying to get something to work here. Um, and if you guys are on Windows, the Power Toys for Windows is pretty amazing. And I'm still trying to get this tool to work. Here it is. Here, zoom it. Like I haven't got this tool to work yet. I've actually got it on right now, but for whatever reason I can't. So if I Control Shift 1, oh, it's working. Um, Sweet. And now if I Control 2, oh hey, look at that. Yay. Never mind, I got the tool to work. Into the Twitch sphere. Yeah, I love my YouTube community too. You guys are amazing. Um, but yeah, I'm looking forward to this because now we can start. Instead of me doing stuff, I can be like, hey, look, we're on push here, right? Um, and now I can call out, hey, this host stuff right here. I like this stuff instead of trying to put display block and things like that. So very, very happy. I was coffee crashing. All right. So we're in a good place. I love it. This is working. Very, very cool tools. The Power Toys for Windows, they would allow me to do things like if I take this warp tab and move it, if I hold down shift and move it, I've got this zone where if I drop it, it's going to resize the window to fit that. That's how I can keep my window to the side of the screen, and it's always in the same spot, and I know where it is, right? Um, there's a whole bunch of other really cool tools that we can use, like the clicking stuff that we're seeing here. So well worth it. Anyway, I want to make sure. So there were no updates, but the MCP server, I would love to get that set up on a stream. Yeah, the zones. Oh, you're dealing with Zone.js. Yeah, we took all of that out. Anyway, if we go take a look at Tour of Heroes, they're updating their hero, right? So we got here. They're now adding an ID to their hero. And it's got a name property on it. So let's go take a look at our hero, right? And in our hero, in our hero's model, we just have a hero name, right? We just had a hero, and we didn't give it a name. So let's go ahead and we will add an actual hero model, right? And so we'll add our file, and this will be our hero.model.ts, right? Our hero model is going to export a type, hero, and we're going to add a couple of things to it, right? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to add our ID, which is a number, and our name, which is a string. And it looks like they've done Tour of Heroes a few times because Copilot already knows what's coming, right? But for right now, we're adding a type. This is the point where I get questions like, Tour of Heroes is doing an interface, you're doing a type, right? And why are you picking a type versus an interface? And there are a couple of reasons for it. Like in the beginning, types were actually faster than interfaces, right? So when you were first using TypeScript, types were a lot faster than interfaces, and there was a reason for that, right? Types can be or interfaces can be extended, right? So if we go here, and I do interface hero, right? Here, somebody in like my heroes, let's change this. Let's rename this. This should be the heroes view. Right, because that's what we called it, the heroes view. And actually, it should be heroes dash view. So there's a reason for this. And I would actually make this a type also. I did an interface before, but I would make this a type, right? Because there's a reason for it, and the reason is I could actually go here and I could go export interface hero. And here I could put ID as a string, and then I could add a first name as a string, and last name that's a string, right? And now I've got a race condition based on which loads first. It's more likely that the hero model will load first, but my hero interface, because here interfaces can be merged in TypeScript. What actually happens is if we export interface hero here, right? And ID is a number. And name is is a string. We're getting some helpful stuff here. So TypeScript has fixed this. In the past, you used to be able to redefine these, right? But here, if I do like const default hero, right? Here I've got ID 0 and name, right? Default hero. It is picking up that I'm missing first name and last name, right? So TypeScript is helping me, but notice that this is being added after the interface, and so this could be hidden in a file somewhere or things like that, right? This is why I prefer to export types. If I don't, if I don't expect my type to be extended, right? And so now if I go export interface hero, right? It's already going to tell me, hey, you can't do that, right? So if I try to add my first name string, notice that here it's telling me I've got a duplicate identifier, right? But as soon as I make this an interface, it doesn't care. As soon as I remove the equal sign, right? It doesn't care, right? Because you can extend interfaces through interface merging, but types are safer. And this was the reason that types were faster, because it didn't have to worry about the merging. And I think technically types are a little bit faster because there's still that idea of merging types or interfaces, right? But the speed isn't the concern anymore for me as much. It's I don't want to accidentally, I don't want to accidentally extend an interface or things like that. But hey, Ole, hey, Johanderson, good to see you. My new job is amazing. I work with a great team. Really enjoying it. I've been doing a lot of like web perf, and right now I'm deep into the guts of how do you write a RESTful service where I work. I'm working on some documentation about like RESTful services and things like that. It's a lot of fun. Like I said, I work with a lot of really, really cool people. The weird thing for me is I haven't been into an office seriously in a long time. Like when I worked at Bill, I think I went into the office once a week. In my current role, we have every other week, so a week in and a week off, or a week out, right? Not off, but a week in the office and a week at home. I haven't gone into an office in such a long time, and I've got an hour train ride ahead of me to get into downtown Salt Lake City. I'm not going to try and pay for parking and try and drive in during rush hour to downtown Salt Lake City. It's just, I mean, I imagine, any of you guys that live close to a big city, trying to drive into like the downtown area of a big city, and Salt Lake's not even that big of a city, but just trying to drive into the downtown area during rush hour and then trying to find parking, and I don't want to pay for parking. And so my company covers a free transit pass, so I can take the train. The train will drop me off a couple blocks away from where I work, and I can walk a couple of blocks. So it'll be interesting. I get distracted easily. I'm very curious, like what it's going to be like working in an office with a group of people, because I do tend to get distracted very easily. So I may have to start, using headphones and things like that. But we'll see. Anyway, our hero is no longer of type string. Now we're going to make our hero a hero, right? we're going to import our hero model, which now changes this. And this is where we're going to get into you know, I like to create these abilities to create the objects. It makes it easier in the future. So we're going to export a function, create hero. Our option ID, we're going to make it a -1. We don't have one, and then default hero, that works. And then all we need to do here is just say, hey, we are going to call create hero, and we're just going to go options.hero, right? And here it's complaining because hero or undefined is not assignable to parameter of type partial hero. Well, we can fix this. And this is the other thing we can do here. We can just say, hey, we've got a default value of an empty object, right? And in our hero model, we also have a default value of an empty object. And so now our view model will work just fine. Undefined is fine. And we've made our interface more friendly for our developers. So we can create these simple views. And the cool thing about this is as we go back to our heroes view, right? Our hero store, here, string is not assignable to type hero. That's absolutely true, right? So it caught this already for us. We need to add a name for Windstorm, right? And here, again, it's saying that, you know, property ID is missing here. So our create heroes view is only going partial down to the, like we could go partial much further, but we're going to just, and my ID is in the wrong place, right? So we could make our partial go all the way down. Hey, Michael Dev, good to see you, man. But I'm not going to go that far down. If you want to provide a hero, you can provide the full hero, right? So we're creating a default hero view, but this is the nice thing about creating these helper methods, right? You could absolutely create these yourselves. I like to create factories to do default views because they help with testing. They help with a lot of other things. And this method allows me to control how a hero is created. Right, so here we're saying we can get a partial hero. Here, right, we're saying the hero is partial. And I'm not even sure, like I've never tried this. Like, I don't know. We can experiment with that later. I want to get into actually writing the code. So our hero store.hero, well, if we run this, we're going to get kind of a weird weird output, right? We get object, which is definitely not what we want. And, you know, we could go here and, right, we could add in the JSON pipe, right? Which we get because we're importing the common module. I don't even think we need the common module. We can just bring in the JSON pipe here. And get rid of the common module, and we should be fine, right? So, you know, there's our JSON representation of Windstorm. Not great. which is why in the Tour of Heroes, the very next thing they do after this is in the Heroes components, right? They add in the one with the windstorm, but then to show the hero object, they add this to the template, right? This H2. So let's go ahead and copy this. And we're going to do the same. But we're getting an interesting error here. And this error relates to the fact that we're trying to access a signal, right? Well, in Hero Store, right? So the first thing we can do is we could go through and we could do this, right? We could go and go Hero Store, right? .hero .name, right? And this is all cool and works just fine, but right. So if we go take a look, when we go take a look at our code, now we're getting Windstorm's details, we're getting an ID, and we're getting a name, and this all looks fine, right? Not necessarily the way we want to see it, and we can clean this up a little bit in the future, but not bad, right? And when we look at what we're getting from the Tour of Heroes, well, we're going to add an uppercase pipe. Cool. But we can do better with Angular 20. And Angular 20 has this new structural control directive, right? We can say @let, and here we can say, hey, we want hero. Need to remember @let name equals variable. That's how it works, right? So here we can say, hey, hero equals hero store.hero, right? And now we can scope our hero stuff. So let's go here. Am I doing this wrong? I think we need the semicolon. Is that right? There we go. And here, now we should be able to go with just hero. Let me remind myself here. Let's go find the let directive. @let. Because I'm doing something wrong. Oh, there's no brackets. Yep, thank you, Michael. So we're just declaring a template variable, right? So the nice thing about this is that Angular upgraded their template code, and WebStorm has also upgraded it, right? So WebStorm now understands that hero is a variable of type hero. So I'm getting hero.name, right? And using @let, we can do some nicer code, right? And you're like, well, wait, what about reactive stuff, right? Well, the @let allows us to handle the reactive changes here. So when this changes, our bindings are going to be updated and changed because we are binding to the signal here, right? And so this is a big help, right? It'll allow us to simplify our code here because, right, hero store.hero over and over again can make your code more difficult to read. one thing to be careful about, and I'm not sure how I feel about it yet, or what direction I want to give on this. But hero, my hover stuff, I'm looking at that. It's in the wrong place, and it's also telling me that it's of type any, but that's not true. It could be easy for you to hide what is in hero, right? How to use template literals with inline components. Template literals. You're talking about so right here, I could say, you know, this is my hero title. Is that what you're saying? Where I declare a template literal variable, or I'm curious. Image. You sent an image. Oh, very interesting that it cut that off. So what Ole is asking about is whoops. What Ole is asking about, and he provided this is an example, right? So we're trying to put a template string literal inside of a source, right? And he's trying to basically concatenate this, right? Because if I take this out, it gives me all sorts of weird errors, right? So you have to. I think you could just do it this way. Hold on. Does that not work? No, it doesn't. It doesn't know what that is. I actually wouldn't do it this way. What I would do instead of trying to put a template literal in my template, is I would take this and in my code here, I would add a protected link, right? Equals, and then I would paste this in. And then I don't have to escape it or things like that. Right. And I would probably make it a computed, right? So that we can compute it based. Oh, triple. But it must be a string. It didn't work with Atlas. And yeah, so Michael's saying that we could go up here. And instead of doing what I did and what you did, we could triple escape these, right? Still ugly. I don't like this. And the reason I don't like this is if we look at our code right now, we've got some logic in the template, right? So there are a couple of ways I would solve this. So the first way I would look at it is if I needed the 640 by 480, right? I would potentially do it this way, and then we could put it in as a string and then add this to a pipe, right? So this could be our base URL pipe, right? And so now the base URL can attach the base URL to the front, and then the string, right? And where this might become useful is in like a for loop, right? The way I prefer to do something like this is instead I would have protected read only base URL, and here I would have a computed, right? And so we've imported our computed, maybe? Come on. There we go. Right, and my computed is going to return, right? And here I could just add in, you know, just for completeness, but protect, I would actually do a read only private, right? URL equals, sure, that works. But, and we can make it a signal of that, so that we can use it with our computed, right? Return, and then we can return this.url, right? That, and then up here, our source now becomes our base URL, right? And we need to add our stuff there. Not sure why it doesn't like this. Oh, this is coming from ESLint, that's why, because we don't have an alt, right? And then it's going to tell us that, you know, we can use ng source, right? But the reason I prefer this over, you know, what you're doing, is the base URL is now, this logic has been moved out of the template, and because it's out of the template, right? And so, right, if we mix it into the template, then testing it becomes a component test, right? If we move it here, right, then now our base URL, the logic to calculate the base URL has been moved out. And the nice thing is that we could dump this into the store, right? If we wanted to. And so then our store is testable. And now we can unit test this URL, and we don't have to worry about all the different permutations, right? Like if base URL changes, or if the hero ID changes, or who knows what, right? We don't have to worry about that. It's the same with the pipe, right? So if you use a pipe, you can test the pipe and make sure that the pipe works. And so you're doing, because the testing that's going to happen on this code right here, if you leave it as that string, right, you're probably not going to test it fully and properly, and you're probably not going to write the proper tests. And I'm not making a commentary on you, I'm making a commentary on myself and the industry as a whole, right? Because it's very likely that you'll test it properly, but somebody else might come along and remove some of those tests, or might not understand the tests and they break, and so they comment them out, or who knows what, right? If the tests are on logic, right, we've moved this logic, right? The concatenation is logic that was in the template. And that's one thing that I do want to make sure that, you know, as you're working, and as we're looking at like the total cost of owning the code in the template is difficult to maintain, it's difficult to test, it's also difficult to search for, right? And it becomes difficult to compose and share, right? All of those things increase the cost of owning that code, right? If you take that code and you move it into logic in, you know, a controller, or you move it into logic into a service or something like that, that's code that can be tested. That's code that can be reused. That's code that, right? So you're decreasing the cost of ownership of that code. So yeah. And let's take a look. The joke tax. It must be a string. It didn't work with let. Yeah. And for whatever reason, it's allowing you to put HTML in YouTube, but not it's not multi-streaming it. So you guys aren't seeing some of the stuff he's putting in there. But yeah, like I recommend doing it this way. I also recommend using signals in your templates, even for values that might be static, because it helps you to become more reactive. And in the future, they might not be static values, right? So, very good question. And you know, most of my decisions anymore are driven by, you know, what is the code going to cost me to own it in the future, right? um so yeah. Oh, nice. So the new ng uses a signal for the title, and I totally agree with that. um um Signals give you a lot of powerful things. And we can actually take out this JSON pipe, right? We actually don't need any of this, and our code still works. Um, so, right, our windstorm is working just fine. We don't have any errors in our console. Oh, change detection strategy is undefined. Really? Interesting. That's very interesting. If we go take a look at this code, um, it's telling us the change detection strategy is undefined. However, if we add the common module back, what if I import change detection strategy here? It's not going to work. But if I add the common module, oh, very interesting. Typically, I like to take the common module out, but without the common module, it doesn't know what change detection strategy is. What if we take out the common module again, and in our providers, we provide change detection strategy? Still doesn't work. Because one of the biggest things that's going to increase the size of your bundles is importing common module everywhere. Not yet unstable for that. Yeah, so like it's strange to me that by removing common module here, and like I typically do this for the change, for like the bundle sizes, right? Because if we remove common module, um, so if we remember, like our main was 241K. We're gonna let this build, but that's so weird that like it doesn't know. Yeah, that I mean that's just typical type X is not Y. Um, it's in the hot module reloading. So like if we take that out, does it give us anything? So 241, 241. So taking that out actually hasn't improved our bundle sizes. So meh. We'll let it be. Um I wonder if it's the server side rendering because like I haven't done a lot of server side rendering and static site generation. It might be needed for the stuff that's set up that way, or it might be some I don't know. I don't know why it's needed. Um, but I agree with you, Ola. I almost always take out the common module. Um, Fascinating. Anyway, let's get back to it, right? So we've now got this code here, right? And one thing we could probably do to clean this up a bit is we could take a look and make it a card, right? So to make it a card, um, we add the card class. So let's we'll make it like a large card, right? So we can go card XL, and we'll add a shadow small to it also. So here, what we can do is we can just say, hey, let's add a div. Or actually, yeah, we'll worry about this later, right? So this class will be card XL, and we'll do shadow small on it, right? To kind of match theirs. We'll move all of this stuff inside of our div. So there we go. So now we're inside of our card. The next thing we can do is if we go take a look. So we need a card body, and then we can make our H2 the card title. Let's go ahead and do that. So here, we'll just add another div. And this class will be card body. Right. And we'll just move this down here. And our hero title, we can take this out. I don't need this variable anymore, but we can make this class equals card dash title, right? And that should okay. So we can't see the card very well because it's not showing up. Let's give it a background. So if we take a look, oh, that's not where we want to be. Uh-oh. Hero editor. I think that's where we were. Yep. Okay. So Daisy here, they are using BG base 100. So we'll lighten up our base a little bit here. So we can add our BG base 100 here. And let's see if our card shows up a little bit nicer. No. What have I done? Card title. So we got our card. Let's take a look. Let's inspect this and just see what we've got. We inspect this. So here's our card class. There's our shadow small. Card class. Let's go with like a background. Hot pink. And it doesn't like that because obviously we didn't make it important. So there's the card. The card is there. Let's try a different background color. So BG base, let's go with like a 800 here. Does that work? Where are they putting the color on there? Am I putting it in the wrong place? So here's the card body. They do have. Let's just do like let's do, instead of a BG base, let's do a BG secondary and just see if I don't have all of my colors. Okay. So it is the color itself. Let's go take a look at Daisy's color reference. And so base 100 mixes into the background pretty good, pretty well. There wasn't a BG base 300. We could go with neutral. So if we went with BG neutral here, then now as we look at it, we've got our card, right? For whatever reason, Let's make it a, instead of card XL, let's make it a card small. Right. Because there seems to be a lot of padding and spacing around it. And that's fine. I'm curious what's going on here at the top. So here's our card. There's that. Okay, so my H2 has a whole bunch of padding at the top. And that's what's causing all this extra padding. If we go back and look at the card, so within a card title, they do have a card body. Did we do the same? Card body, card title. I don't know. You know, one thing we could do is we could say like styles, right? And here we could add in our dot card body and an H2. Okay, H2. And here we could say that, you know, we want margin. Well, actually, you'd say we want 0. Well, we could try that, see what it does, right? So it shrunk down our margins on this, and we can see on our H2, we do have a bottom, but that's fine. Right now, I don't care so much about that bottom. But we could actually take that off, right? We could just say that we just want. We could even get rid of the styles here. And instead, we could just say class is M0, right? We don't want any margin on our H2. And so now as we come back, it doesn't margin 0. So where is that margin coming from? It's probably coming from the card title. Where is that margin coming from? So is there a margin top and a margin bottom? I mean, we could take this and go MTB0, right? That's going to take the top and bottom off. Yeah, we're doing zoneless. We are zoneless, and the way we can check if we're zoneless, that's so weird. It must not be rebuilding it. That must be the issue. Because it's still not. It should have refreshed this. Well, look, the way you can check if you're zoneless is if you just go to console and just go zone, with a capital Z. Zone is not defined. So yeah, we're 100% zoneless here. We'll add a test here if that forces a rebuild. No, we've still got the top and bottom margins. And here's the thing is that it is multiplying it by 0. So if, I mean, we could just take that and make it a 0, but me unchecking that does nothing. And this is where, like, I'm trying to figure out where the I'm trying to figure out where these, because we've already got a gap on the card title. Oh. But that's not even affecting it. Oh, right here, pros. So we've got a higher level. So it's the pros itself that's causing the issue. So let's see if we can turn off the pros. I think there's a way to turn off pros. Where do I have it? Is that the pros? Tailwind typography. Pros. Not pros. That's what we want. We want our card to be not pros here. And now we should be able to take off the margin on it. There we go. So it's a little bit better, right? Because we aren't getting quite the layout here, right? Card body is flex. If we look at this flex, we've got some natural stuff in here, right? But we're good. That's what I wanted to see. So we can have pros on. Yeah. Can't you click on the margin prop so it shows you which class is applying it? I thought you could, and I was trying to. So if we take out the not pros, right? And this might be a difference of like Firefox um, versus Chrome, because I thought we could see, where that stuff was coming from. Um, but I don't know. But yeah, Ole, that pros H-ware now, like it's a crazy selector, right? Um, but anyway, without that pros, now our card looks a little bit better, and we'll keep we'll keep cleaning this up over time as we get more things in here. We'll keep cleaning it up, right? Um, but you know what? We should probably commit at this point, right? So what have we done? We've added in the card. We created the heroes model. We created the heroes view. We updated it to use a hero, and the store we updated it. Um, so we can just say, hey, we added the hero card, and eventually we'll factor this out into its own component. And when we do that, we're going to do some stuff to clean this up too. But for right now, we'll follow along and see where they take us, right? So they want us to use the uppercase pipe on the H2. Great, no problem. So here, we can just add in. Wait. So they want the hero name all uppercased. Okay. And I think the uppercase pipe is part of common module, so we don't have to import it. So now when we go take a look, right now Windstorm is in all uppercase. Great. We'll clean this up some more here shortly. So we uppercased our Windstorm. And like pipes are a powerful way to do things. With signals, I use pipes a lot less. And in fact, I haven't used a pipe in quite a long time. There are places where I think pipes are like the number pipe is very, very useful. The uppercase pipe is useful. But we could create our own formatters. And instead of doing, hero name, in our hero store, right, we could add with computed here and add some state, right? Grab our state, and we want to compute. Let's go ahead and grab with computed. Come on. There we go. So now we've got our computed. And here we can just say we want our hero display name, right? And now we can just make this a computed variable, which we'll grab. And right now we can just do state hero dot name to uppercase to locale uppercase, right? And I recommend using to locale uppercase because it helps with internationalization and things like that. If you do to uppercase, you may not get proper uppercase letters, right? So we could do this, and then in our components here, instead of doing hero.name, you do hero.displayName, right? And this actually comes off the Hero Store because we added it there. Hero Store dot display name. There we go. Oh, hero display name. Hero display name. There we go. Right. And so now if we go back, we get it in all uppercase. The nice thing about doing it this way versus like with a pipe is, again, we're taking some stuff out of the template. I'm not opposed to like an uppercase pipe because you would test that pipe, right? A currency pipe, you would test that. And sometimes people make mistakes in their logic for changing this, for like display names and things like that. The only reason that I sometimes like to do this is we could go and say, hey, you know, our display name is actually, right, state.hero.id in parentheses, right? And then here, the name, right? And so by moving this into a computed in the store, we can have what is going on here? You guys see that? Windstorm shows up with a 1 and then it disappears. Why is that happening? So we've got the name and the display name. Our hero store has the ID. It is computed. I want to see, like, if I do a pre here, and let's just do hero store dot hero display name, right? Now it's not doing it. Skill issue. It's definitely a skill issue, Michael. And I can't reproduce it now. You guys saw that, right? Like it was that is so weird. But there are reasons to use pipes, and I'm not arguing against pipes. I actually think pipes are very, very useful. But what I am saying is, you know, when you're considering whether to use pipes or not, sometimes thinking a little bit ahead to the future, and I'm curious if I take that out, no, it still does the same. I wonder if it was a pre-render, like I wonder if it was a hydration issue that we were having, with like SSR type stuff, right? Because we got the initial, and then almost immediately after, it was replacing it, and I'm not sure why. transcended to the paranormal, renewing contract for 10 more streams. Hey, I'm all for it. I'm here for it. It sounds awesome. But again, I don't want to push you guys one way or another. What I do want you to think about is when you're creating things, right? Um, think about potential future, and maybe the time to do it is not now, right? Like this hero display name, we could absolutely go back to hero.name with the uppercase pipe, right? Um, and this is perfectly fine. And we could set our store back, and we could take out our computed. So there we go. So now our computed is gone, and now we're back to where we were, and this is perfectly fine. Where I think it might get interesting is if you found yourself doing this and going hero.id, right? Now I think you're in an interesting case where you should start to think about, well, maybe I don't use this pipe and instead start doing something like that, right? Should those divs be p tags instead for more semantic HTML? You're talking about these divs, right? And I think, or you're talking these divs here, right? You're probably right. Um, this is more semantic markup, right? These divs are structural, so this one and this one are structural, right? Um, the divs that were here were less structural and more markup, and p tags would do what the yeah. I agree with you there, Johanderson. Also, like I'm a big fan of simplifying the markup as much as possible and the amount of testing needed in the markup. Anything you move into a store or other service like that can be tested with unit tests, right? It can be isolated and tested, and you can test it very, very thoroughly. You can do some of my favorite testing, like property-based testing and things like that, that will just really, really stress test your classes, right? Um, as soon as you start moving things into the template, it becomes much more difficult to test, right? And if this uppercasing was super important, um, then you would need to write a component test around it, right? You could use the test harness, you could use all sorts of stuff, and you could grab this H2 and you could say, hey, does the H2 have what we want in it? Or we could bind it to hero display name, very, very, test hero display name. And I want to leave this, like, I don't want to push one way or the other. I want to more push towards the discussion, right? I tend to side with Johanderson, but again, when you're writing code, it's better to be consistent across the code base. Um, right? Always look forward to long-term effects of what you're doing, but one of the biggest ways to cause issues with long-term code is to go in and start writing code that's different than everybody else. That will make everybody angry. It will make the code less maintainable. It'll make the code less readable. So there's a lot of reasons why you might pick pipes over what I'm saying and things like that, right? But we're in a good place, right? Let's go back and see what they're saying to do next, right? So they want us to be able to edit the hero. And they want us to do it with two-way binding. And they're using the forms module, huh? And then we're going to factor this out to a heroes component. We're already in a heroes component. But they want us to be able to edit the hero name and do it with a two-way binding, right? So let's go ahead and do that. But we're using a store, so well, let's experiment, right? Oh, and the divs I was using were because they were using divs before, right? Let's look at their markup for the editor first. So they want a label and they want an input. You could do labels this way. I don't tend to do labels this way, and this comes down to personal preference. So let's go ahead and make the name a div again, right? And here we're going to change this to be a label, right? And you can say for equals and hero input, right? Is that what they did? ID equals name. Okay. So for name. So we'll just also make it name. I would make it a little bit, I would probably call it hero name. Let's do that, right? Hero name. Right? And the input here is now going to be input ID equals name. Right? And inputs are always self-closing. But if we look at this, oh, we want the placeholder to be name, right? And I'm gonna make it a little bit nicer. Hero's name, right? ID needs to be hero name. And so now if we go take a look at our markup, we haven't bound anything yet, right? Is this not compiling? Because this is definitely not the, oh, it is. It is. It is. My input, I need to make my inputs look different with using Daisy. So let's go grab some Daisy. Let's search for our inputs. So there are a couple of ways that we can do inputs, right? This is a typical input, and I just need to add the input class to it, and it's going to give us some nice inputs. Right, the text label inside. We can do something like that, where they're doing some crazy stuff. Ghost style. We're pretty close to the ghost style as it is, but your input ghost. And then there's all the different input colors and the different sizes. So input ID equals that, class equals input. There we go. Right, so we'll clean up the styling here in a bit as we get this more done. But right, we aren't binding. Right, there's no binding going on here. We aren't updating the store. So we need to be able to update the store to get our two-way binding. I'm very, very curious. And I've never done this before, but if we go here and we go ng model, and let's go ahead and import that from the forms module. And we say the ng model equals, and here we want to bind to hero.name. Very, very curious what happens. I've never done this. Nothing. Right. And in the console, yeah. Oh. Div. It expected, so during the hydration, it was expecting an H2. What did I do? There's the H2. Let's just take this out for a second. Do I get that same error? No. So it is the binding. So we've got an issue here where we can't do the two-way binding, right? And here we could go hero store dot hero dot name. But I think we're going to run into the same issue. Well, you know, the binding before wasn't to a signal. If we look, it built everything. Oh, never mind. So we're getting a binding to a computed value here. And now as soon as I try to change it, it's going to break, right? Michael, have you ever done this? Maybe the body be, maybe the body be. Maybe the body be a section. It's possible, yeah, Michael. For the semantic markup, we can probably talk about that too. I prefer computed. I would start a discussion with the team because, yeah, and try to implement exactly, Johanderson. Do stuff randomly and teach your team when they ask you what the, yeah. But at the end of the day, being consistent is, yep. Yeah, well, and I used to be that person too that would go in and try and change things and be like, "Oh, I'm better," right? But that's code should be predictable, and it should be predictable across the team. And there's a big reason for that. It's you spend a lot of time reading code, and so if you can't read the code, it doesn't work. Speed running your career, yeah. Drafting a. um, but here's the problem: we can't bind directly to the signals that we're given from Signal Store. And so, you know, there are a couple of ways that we can handle this, right? The way I typically would do it, and this is where like stores can become a little bit more frustrating. Let's first before I dive into this, let's go to NGRX, right? There's that Excalidraw. Signal store template. There's more Angular. Where's my NGRX? Let's go into the docs. And go into signals. Signal store. And I'm just seeing if there's something that I'm not remembering here. You're working on native resource and linked signal support. That's awesome. Yeah, so this is the piece right here that because we're binding to the update query and update order, right? And I just wasn't sure if they'd added anything recently that yeah, with props is good. State tracking, get state and effect. Watch state, manual cleanup. So you can add entities and updating entities, but what I'm curious about is oh, they've got events in here. Interesting. I need to get into events some more, but you can add reducers to your signal store. That's cool. Which allows you to hook in side effects. Very, very cool. Oh. But because what we can do is we could add a value binding here. Hero.name, right? And then the other thing we can do is add an input binding. And that's an interesting one. I don't actually want to do this. I want to add it here. Update hero name, and we can add this. Oh, come on. Create method, update hero name. And let's grab this here. And we're gonna make our update hero name protected. And our event is going to be of type HTML input. Is it just input event? There we go. Then we can just do const value equals that. Do I need that? I do need that. So the input event has a target. The event target could be null, which means that we need to handle that situation. Right, so we could say this or null, which is ugly, becomes string or undefined. And then now we can wrap our hero store and update the hero name. Right, but we don't have an update hero name method. So we need to go to our store and we just add with methods, right? And here we have our state. And we're going to add update hero name. And it will take a string or null, return a void. And here we can just say that we are going to patch our state, patch state, and we're going to bring in state, patch state, state, and we are going to, so for our state, we need to return a new object, right? Because patch state returns the object that we, or actually we can just pass in a partial. So here we can patch, we go hero, and here we can just do name. I think that works, right? I think we probably need, does that not work? Oh, string or null is not assignable to type string. Null is not assignable to type string. So name equals that. And actually, state hero name is a string, and it's not string or null, it's string or undefined. Nah, we're hero is missing ID. This is where we get into some other stuff. What time is it? So we're basically writing a reducer, right? Because here we could do state.hero state.hero comma name, right? And we're using a spread operator to do this and overriding it. Not a big fan of that. It just doesn't read as well. It's just a much more difficult way to handle this. And if we look into our signal store, checkbook store provided in with this. So update query, patch state, store state, and then right they're spreading it also. Think any request for document failed. Let's see. Immer versus mutative JS. That's what I want. Mutative JS. So we're gonna add mutative because I like mutative. So here's mutative. Mutative is a nice library that has some benefits over Immer and stuff like that. We're going to add mutative as to our package library really quick, and this will be the last thing that I can do today, but we'll go ahead and do that. So p and pm install mutative. And mutative gives us some tools to create immutable objects and treat them like write code. It creates proxies from these objects, but we can write code that looks like it's imperative, but treat it well. Write code that looks like it's mutating state, but treat it like it's not mutating state. It's always going to create an immutable object. So one of the things we can do here is we can import create from mutative. Boom. And then here we can just patch state hero, and we can just say, hey, we want to create, and we're going to use our state.hero, and then we're going to have a draft of that. And that draft is what we can modify. So in our draft, now we can just say, hey, draft.name equals name, right? And why doesn't it like this? So here we also need to mark this as a hero. Boom. And it's made a mess because why wouldn't it? Create state hero draft. delete that. There we go. So now we've created our partial updater that can take a hero and allow us to modify the name. And input event, parameter of type event is not assignable parameter of type input event. Event is missing. Okay. Oh, I wish the typing was a little bit better, but we can call this event. That's fine. Update hero name, and we've got value here. We're going to make that null or undefined. You know what? I don't want to do this here. That makes my code more difficult to maintain. We're going to have a ton of those. We're going to go back to the store. And here we can just call this hero name. And inside of our code, we can just say const name equals hero name. Yeah, we can trim it. That's fine. For that, right? And so if hero name is undefined, we're just going to send an empty string. If it is defined, then we're good. Hero view, I should be able to send type string. I need string or undefined. And actually, we can just do that. No, let's make it string or undefined, and there's a reason for that. If I make it string or undefined, here we're fine, but as soon as I take out value, it's going to complain that I didn't pass a property, right? If I go and I make this an optional parameter, right? It's not going to complain here, right? Like string or undefined is still valuable, but as soon as I do that, it's fine with it. And so it's important to think about like your types a bit, right? This isn't really an optional parameter. It's a parameter that I'm allowing to be string or undefined, right? And the other thing you could do is you could use the nullable. Is it nullable? Non-nullable. I need to. There's a type that you can use that allows things to be. Let's go take a look. Let's go look it up really quick. So TypeScript. And here, utility. So the utility types. Awaited partial, required, read only, record, pick, omit, exclude, extract, non-nullable. There is a non-nullable, which takes out the undefined. I thought there was another return type inside, no infer. This type, intrinsic. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I created that type at one point in time and was using it. Yeah. Yep. And that is true. We could use our own type. but for right now, I think we're okay. Everything should compile. No. Oh, it's saying this is an input event. Right? Is that what it's saying? Let's see here. No, it's just saying it's just an event. Yeah, that one fixed it. I've got the binding wrong still. No, I don't. My binding's not wrong. That's really weird. There's one other thing that I would recommend here, and we'll for right now, just because we're being quick, we'll just say function is HTML input element, right? And yeah, the element could be event target or that. I don't know where that came from. So this, now what we could do is this simplifies things because now we could say is HTML input element, right? And now we can say $event.target. So now we could say event.target.value or undefined, right? And that's safer than the casting we were doing, because casting it basically means that, hey, if that object existed, let's grab it, right? And the other thing we could really even do is instead of saying this, we could add one that's like function has value, right? And value is unknown, right? And value is a string or number of Boolean. And actually, we could even say has value prop, right? Let's see what it does with that, right? So if I do function has value prop, right? And here we could say element, or we could say target, right? And target is unknown. And we could say target has value string. And I don't like this right here because again, we're casting, right? Because target could be unknown. So we need to, before we do that, we need to say, hey, return target, right? And right, not target, because that's going to coerce it. But now we don't need to cast this. Now we can say, well, we can say type of target or and we can say target is instance of object, right? And value in target. And Oh, I've got a capital instance of. Right. So now what we're doing is instead of doing casting, we're saying, hey, it's a target. Target is an instance of object. Almost everything in Java, we may not need this test, right? We could just say it's not undefined and it has the property value on it. Okay, so we do need that check for object. But now what we can say is instead of it's an HTML input, we can just say it has value prop event dot target. Right. So now if it's got a value, then it's either that or undefined. And we can move this has value prop someplace else where we can use it in the future. And in fact, we could even go so far as to say, hey, function get value prop, right, and target is an unknown any, and so now we no longer need all of this. We've composed our stuff from this. Now we could just say, hey, get value prop event target, right? And that way we're grabbing the value off of it. The last thing we need to do is, no, we've got the value in the input bound. So this should, what is going on here? Why is it computed windstorm? Let's stop and rebuild it. Because it might be caching some stuff on the server side of the build that is causing the issues that we're seeing, right? There we go. So now we're windstorm. So now if we change this to Michael, right, or Jason or Chocomil or I don't know, right, Wolverine. We can see that we've got the bindings in place, and there's extra work involved here. Right, we added some extra functionality that's going to help here. We also introduced a new library that is going to help us with immutability. We also had to add an update method here. And in our bindings, we're no longer able to use the we're no longer able to use the, what do we want to call it, the banana in the box, right? The ng model. But we also, I don't think we need the forms module anymore, do we? Nope. Right. And you could write some stuff that would allow you to bind to hero name in the store, right? And we could take a look at that in the future. Hey, Abradores, you're joining right as I'm ready to end. Sorry about that, brother. You can create your own type and import it everywhere. I wonder what's the story behind Chocomil. I can tell you the story. Yeah, we can end on that story. Because it's worth sharing with everybody. So I lived in Guatemala for a while. And Guatemala has a very, very rich Mayan culture. And there's a lake in Guatemala, Atitlan, and that lake has a lot of resorts around it. Called one of the resorts that I went to is called Panajachel, but there's just a bunch of stuff around the lake. There are 12 volcanoes around the lake. and it's just a famous lake in Guatemala. Very, very beautiful. But the lake has this wind that blows across it called the Chocomil. Um, and the story I heard from like one of the Mayan people is way back, when the Maya were big in Guatemala. There was a tribe that lived on the lake Atitlan, um, and um, the chief had a very, very beautiful daughter, um, and she was just loved by all the tribes that lived around the lake. Right, there were the 12 tribes that lived around the lake that represented the 12 different volcanoes and stuff. But there was this giant um, that fell in love with the beautiful daughter of the chief, right? Um, and so he waded across the lake and he kidnapped the daughter. And as he was wading back across the lake, all of the tribes became very, very angry. Um, and so they went to go attack the giant to get this beautiful daughter of the chief back. And so as the giant was wading across the lake, he was blowing his breath backwards across the lake, causing huge waves that sank all the boats, and they were unable to save the daughter of this chief. Um, and the every day, or every so often, there's this wind that blows across the lake and makes the lake very choppy and dangerous. And that lake is known as the Chocomil. And it relates back to that legend of the giant, who was blowing across the lake to save himself from the boats that were coming to attack him over the daughter that he kidnapped. And so that's the story of the Chocomil that I had heard. And so yeah, you know, I took that on as like the name that I was using everywhere. And when I started streaming, that's the name that I chose, because that's been all of my email addresses and everything have been related to that in some way. So yeah. Only streamer for 3 hours. There are no girls in Italy. I do not believe you 1 second on that one. But yeah, that's the story of the Chocomil. And I'm not sure how good my translation is, because my Mayan was very, very rusty at the time that I heard it. And so when I went to go verify it, there was a lot of secondhand information too. And so, that's the story that I was told. That's why I took it on. I should probably investigate it deeper, but it's a legend that's very, very difficult to investigate. Um, so, but the Chocomil is just a famous wind that makes the Lake Atitlan very choppy and dangerous for boats. Um, there was a legend behind it that I was told that I really liked, so that's where the name came from. My throat is getting a bit dry. I think it's a good time to stop. But thank you guys for joining. I had a lot of fun talking about this. We'll dig into this a little bit deeper with like the updates and stuff, and why this is a good pattern. We'll also extract some of these things out into tools that can be reused. Right, because part of code ownership and part of having healthy code is reusable tools. But thank you guys. Thank you, Michael Dev. And you guys all have a great rest of your weekend. We'll see you next time. I do want to try and get the MCP server set up, but I just don't. With me traveling this week into the office, I don't know what like train schedules are going to look like and things like that. Oh wait, is next week Father's Day? Next week is Father's Day. I won't be streaming next week. If I can get like an impromptu stream up during the week, I'll do that. If I can't, we'll get a stream in the middle of the week the next week, because I will be at home and have better control over when I can get things up and streaming. Father's Day depends on the country. Very, very good point, Michael Dev. Next week is Father's Day in the US, And the reason that matters to me is that if I was streaming on Father's Day, I think my daughters and wife would not be happy with me. Um, train stream be like Matthew, yeah. HTTP resource. Yeah, doing one from the stream, from a train would be interesting. I don't know, like, what my Wi-Fi is even going to look like. Um, HTTP resource was drafted on a train. Yeah, it was. Um, so anyway, I need to end. Thank you guys for being here. It was a lot of fun. We'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your weekend.